Welcome to Brands Over Brews, your weekly chat with marketing and business leaders who are shaping the future of the industry. I'm your host, Pat Cooper. Each episode will explore the strategies, insights, and personal stories of our guests. On today's episode, we have Garik Tate. Garik is an AI futurist, investor, and AI strategy consultant. His expertise lies in the intersection of AI, IQ, and EQ. He makes companies more valuable to institutional buyers and increases their profits with AI. With over a decade of experience as a successful entrepreneur, Garik has founded companies spanning software development, outsourcing, and publishing. Notably, he has led and nurtured organizations to a team size of over 70 employees. Garik is a sought-after speaker on AI's future and its practical application in business. His expertise and passion for the subject has earned him a reputation as a respected voice in the AI community, and he is often sought out by companies looking for advice on how to leverage the power of AI to drive business growth and success. Garik, it's great to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Pat. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, this is the first video version of Brands Over Brews.
Hello,
if I
world.
can get the name out. So this should be a really interesting episode. Well, to kick off our conversation today, Garik, what is your go-to brew?
My go-to brew is a flat white. I like it creamy.
Flat white, okay. I love it. I'll probably go pretty basic today. I'm just drinking some water off to the side. I had 2 Celsius before this episode, thinking that it was a health drink, but it was packed full of caffeine. So I'm definitely buzzing
You're
this
wired.
episode. So,
Oh yeah, I just finished it actually. I get a morning green tea every day,
there we
but
go.
I just finished it off.
I love it. Tea is great. Tea's a great. Well, it's nighttime where I am, so tea's a great wind down drink for me.
Yes, sir.
Well, obviously, Garik, this episode is going to be packed full of AI. So to kick us off, I use AI a lot. I use AI a lot for my work, for the podcast, of course, for outreach and engagement and coming up with new business ideas. But something I think a lot of people use AI for, especially in the age of LinkedIn and cold outreach, is outreach itself. They use AI to, reach out to prospective buyers. Maybe it's to, reach out for employment interviews. So how should people use AI for outreach, first off? And second, are there any bad ways to use it for outreach?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's definitely some ways that you can use it incorrectly that kind of degrades your business and also degrades really just the entire industry. But talking about it, how it goes well, and then we'll say where things veer off, is that AI at this point can allow you to scale your outreach far beyond what it could before. Actually, the reason why I went into cold outreach, because we have one of our businesses is doing AI cold outreach. The reason why I went into that is that I've built businesses successfully off of cold outreach, but I really hated how I had to be as a manager. You have to be very strict on your quotas. You have to hit like this number of emails every day, and it's just a freaking grind, man. Like you have a team of employees, and you're nurturing them, and then like there's this one thing where like they just gotta grind out for 4 hours a day. You can hire VAs, and there's a whole way to do it, but it's just a pain because ultimately you gotta treat people like cogs in a machine. But once I realized with this AI development, with the creation of ChatGPT and the opening of its API, you can take that cog in the machine and you can add like an actual cog into it. You don't need to treat people like machines. You can have an actual machine do it. And the way that works to like make it a little bit practical is you can use a tool like clay.com or use a scraper like Phantom Buster to scrape people's LinkedIns and also scrape their website. You can use different scraping tools. I'm trying to remember one of the ones that we used in the beginning. Right now we mostly use Clay, though, to scrape their website, their LinkedIn. Then we get enough information about them that allows us to actually personalize the messaging. So rather than just very generic like, hey Bob, I see you're in the medical industry. Did you know blah 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 blah? You can actually go into it and personalize the messaging based on their website, based on like their case studies, based on what they say about themselves in LinkedIn. So you can actually make it more relevant to them, saying, hey, I see you have an open role for XYZ. Have you considered? And you can really personalize that at scale now. Before, what would take 15 minutes to write for one person, you can now do for an entire target market. So that's how it would work if it works well.
I think that's really interesting and a really great use case, right? That a lot of people can use in their jobs. Because, when I think of AI, I think of ChatGPT and Gemini and Copilot, and a lot of that is translating data into content. But a lot of what you're talking about is maybe just translating the data, just getting a lot of data so you can segment those potential customer profiles. So I think that's a great use case, and I think that a lot of companies are really getting into that space right now on building stronger, more detailed customer profiles to have better segmentation and better personalization, which of course translates into the AI content game too.
Yeah, and using AI not just for personalizing the message, but you can also use AI to say, like, is this person actually relevant to my campaign? Of right now with platforms like LinkedIn or Apollo, you have to rely on their filters and how they decide how to filter it. But you can now make more of your own filters and ask ChatGPT, like, hey, based on these requirements, how would you rank this on a scale of 1 to 10? And so then that's where things, I think, keep on going right rather than going wrong, because you asked me, where can this go wrong? If you just personalize your messaging, but your messaging isn't relevant to their problem, like, that's gonna be a bad time. Relevance always beats personalization, and what that means is, like, personalization gone bad is like, hey, I see that you went to Seattle University, go Seahawks, buy my stuff. It's like, okay, cool. That is gonna have a short shelf life, if not already has a short shelf life, as these AI tools are being scaled out. Instead, you use something relevant, saying, hey, I saw this about your business. I saw that you have SDRs. Have you considered, automating their outreach? Or I see that your business is hiring developers. Have you considered going with an agency? So on and so forth. So relevance always beats personalization, because then you're actually adding value to their problems.
Yeah, so it's much less of like, oh, hey, I know you crawled some really irrelevant information on my LinkedIn profile, versus, hey, you just engaged with a post, you just, followed me and said, hey, I really like this post that you put out the other week. I think I can add even more value to what you're working on. Here's X, Y, and Z that I'm working on that maybe we can collaborate on. So using AI for that sort of data pulling and, like you said, relevance and personalization is a lot better than, hey, I know what year you were born, where you grew up, what school you went to, all that really irrelevant sort of crap data that people aren't probably going to like that you are focusing in on.
Yeah, I think that the social contract, which is, to be honest, still the social contract we have today, of like, if a human put in effort to write something, to put an effort in something, we generally reciprocate that effort with at least the effort to read it. Now, that social contract changes depending on, like, how much spam you get. It changes based on how busy you are. It changes on a thousand variables, but fundamentally that's a big part of the social contract. And so as AI proliferates, I think that social contract is still valid. It's just now our filter pops up and say, like, wait, did a human actually write this? No, I don't think they did. Therefore, like, I don't need to read it, unless your product market fit's actually good, unless you actually have a good offer, because that's what's gonna make them buy. The social contract might make them pay attention to evaluate, but at the end of the day, the offer has to be amazing still.
That's so true. People know how people talk. So they can differentiate AI from, like, okay, I know we're talking about a certain subject, because it's very clunky. It doesn't sound personal. So yeah, I think putting together a proper pitch with use cases and a proper business product for what they're looking for is incredibly valuable. And whether you're using an AI chatbot or any sort of AI automation tool, you really do need to train it to understand your voice, understand the customer profile you're going after, and understand the product that you're actually selling.
Yeah, I would say on that, the way we go about to make it sound human and make it train it, I use train like in quotation marks, because at this point it's still mostly prompt engineering. So you can train your own model where you're actually adjusting like the weights, but that is something that costs at a minimum, thousands of dollars, and scales up to easily, millions and millions. What we're doing is really more prompt engineering, but with the right tools, one thing you can do that makes it sound a lot more human is you can do prompt chaining. So you gather the data that you need, you make a series of opinions on that data, then on the very last part you put those opinions together into a sentence that sounds human, and it sounds human because your prompt has examples of a human sounding way. And then of course you have to audit its output, like audit 20 of its outputs, but if 20 of them sound human, then you can probably be safe to say, like, okay, now send out 5,000 emails, and you're confident that they're going to have a good hit rate. So you do need to make sure it sounds human, but I would argue on the hill that you can get the AI to sound pretty good if you just put in the work.
Yeah, I think it's definitely evolving, right? AI chatbot tools, especially with a lot of these big brands entering the space like Google and Microsoft and Apple, and it's going to power the entire AI industry and make everything a whole lot better, which is of course scary for a lot of people, right? Yeah. Understandably, that's very scary, but it does seem like you need a formula, you need a process, you need to test and test and test before you send out like 5,000 emails to potential buyers. So I think that's a very great takeaway for that. Now, I know we've been talking a lot about outreach, but I do want to talk about business use cases and business development and how you can really use AI to develop business.
Yeah.
I use AI a lot. I run an e-commerce business with my wife that we use AI for content and idea generation. And of course, this podcast, we use AI to develop transcripts and generate topics and generate outreach emails. But in terms of business as a whole, how can more marketers, business owners, entrepreneurs use AI to develop business for good?
Yeah, I think that it comes in two flavors as far as I can tell. One is you automate a cog in the machine, and there's an appropriate time to do that. And then the other way, which is where I feel like most people are using AI as like a brainstorming assistant, or not even a brainstorming assistant, but like a writing assistant. And the way that I think about, let's talk about the latter just briefly, is that as a human, the value you provide in that process is no longer the writing. Instead, it's a taste, and you need to have good taste, because AI will just, well, honestly, by default, what the AI writes like is like a very bad SEO writer, because it learned to write by scraping the internet, and it turns out most of the internet is hot garbage. It was written by minimum wage SEO writers, and so it way overwrites it. It over delivers. It makes big superfluous paragraphs, and tries to do keyword packing and weird things. So you need to have the taste in order to overcome that, in order to make sure that it's outputting the kind of work that you really want it to, because you're still accountable for its output. And I think we all know that. We can't hold the machine accountable. We have to be accountable. The other way, which I think is really only now starting to get fully appreciated, and we weren't really ready for it, I think, as much, or many businesses weren't ready in 2023, but now in 2024, where I think that people really need to be focusing on is AI for automation. And so what that is when you look at your business processes as links in a chain, as a series of inputs and outputs, you try to find those areas in the business where you have a problem. You don't try to do this. You don't try to over-engineer the wrong things. You try to find the areas in your business that actually have a problem. And for me, I define a problem in one of four ways. So this is what I walk my clients through. It's either inhibiting your growth. It is costing you a lot of money. It is just annoying and painful, which is reducing morale. Or a lot of errors are happening. So if you have a link in your chain that is causing pain on one of those four dimensions, you then ask, okay, is this something we can add AI into? And AI is trained off of pretty much the entire internet, so like it can solve most white collar problems if the inputs and outputs are clear. And a lot of times making sure the inputs are super clear is a big challenge, because a lot of times we think the inputs are clear, but the inputs are including all the context that we know as a human being. If we're talking with a client, the input is not just that back and forth conversation with a client, it's all the context of everything we've said before. So how do you organize that data? How do you feed that data into the AI? That's a big question. But if you can solve that problem of what are the inputs, and the inputs are repeatable and the outputs are repeatable, then that's a step in your business you can automate. And you do that with tools like Zapier and Make.com and just triggering the OpenAI API. But you can automate those steps. And so I think that we're going to hit a level of productivity among small and medium business owners that's really quite astounding.
That is a great point, because AI is not just content creation. It's not just data pulling, but it's also automation. And it's many of those fantastic tools, like you mentioned, Zapier, a lot of CRM API tools that are being built out currently and pre-existing that really are fundamental in business processing. So I think that's really interesting. And just like any entrepreneurs looking to solve a problem, AI can be used for that exact same purpose too, along with automation.
Yeah, if the inputs are clear, then it can really, I think it can really solve just about any challenge if the inputs and outputs are clear and digitally accessible.
Yeah, I think that's a great take on how most business owners can really fundamentally implement it in their own day-to-day business processing and really developing new businesses. Now, to take our conversation back a little bit,
one little tidbit that might be helpful
for sure, yeah.
on the automation side. So when and we can maybe dive in more examples, but one example of an automation that maybe people don't think about is, people think a lot about automations for like generating content or generating messaging. Help, we do cold outreach, so we use the output is therefore the messaging. But you can also use AI to do judgment calls. But if you use AI for judgment calls, it's really important that you add the judgment at the end of a step-by-step thinking process. So first let me explain the reason, and I'll explain how you do it. The reason why it's really important is that AI has a lot of the same problems that humans do, which is essentially confirmation bias. If we make, a lot of times we think we're making a decision, but the reality is we've kind of already made a decision inside of our gut, and then we start with that, and then we justify along the way. But if we hold off and say, wait, let me not make a decision now, let me just kind of think through all the pros and cons, probably we're going to have a better decision at the end of that process. And so it's the same thing with AI. If you, for instance, if you want to say, hey, is this client a good prospect? Is this lead a good prospect? If you just have it do a yes, no, and just and you can feed it all the data, but if its single output is a yes, no, it didn't really put a lot of thought into that answer. And frankly, I would think that it would be kind of useless. Instead, if you ask AI, like, give me a list of 5 pros, give me a list of 5 cons, now weight those 5 pros and cons, now, and so this is chain prompting, we have to do it step by step, and then at the very end, you then say, give me a yes, no, and then you can just have it, because maybe you need a binary yes, no in order to feed the next automation, so like, if yes, then trigger blah, 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 so you don't want to give a long answer afterwards, you just, boil it down to a yes, no. You can do that at the end of its chain of thought. And that's why also like a lot of prompt engineers are using the phrase, let's think about this step by step, because that's a phrase that helps trigger the AI to think through the logic before arriving to the answer. It's the same idea. So I wanted to give that example as like another path other than just content creation that you can use AI for.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You stole my counter argument, because when you said judgment, I was immediately thinking bias. And I was thinking AI has a bias, but no, I think that's a really great use case for how you can remove your own bias and feed AI a situation and have them kind of solve it too. So I think that's really, really cool.
I think that it's hard to say when bias is removed. I think that word has a lot of cultural and political weight. But I would argue, I would fight for this to say that it would reveal the thought process a little more. It would add some more transparency, because it's not.
Yeah.
It does have hidden biases baked into the model's weights and biases, but what it's mostly doing is it's reading the previous words in the conversation to then inform the next word in the conversation. So that's what it weights most importantly. It doesn't. That's a high weight. So if you have it kind of step through its logic, a lot of the hidden information gets revealed because it's going off of its own words. It has confirmation bias. It will try to reinforce what it said. So you can just see what it said and see why it's saying what it says next. So it does reveal a lot more of its thinking, which is valuable.
Yeah, because I think people can have invisible bias where you don't know where all the inputs are coming from. But when you use it with AI, you can like reveal your math of your bias, of why you're saying this.
On
so
one
you
layer,
have
for sure. Yeah.
kind of a full, yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a really great use case of using AI, like you mentioned, more for just pulling data and pulling content. It's really a fundamental piece of technology that a lot of business owners can use to do a full 360, But while we're still talking about, a lot of technical pieces of AI, let's just take a step back and define what AI is and what it is as a piece of technology and how it's evolving.
Yeah, so AI, artificial intelligence, it's kind of a catch-all term for making smart machines. But the way that we use it primarily has to do with neural nets. So neural nets are things that have input nodes and have output nodes. And starting around, I think, 2017, Google released a white paper called Attention is All You Need, which invented the transformer architecture. Google just kind of sat on it for a while. That white paper just kind of was in the ether. And then OpenAI took that and actually ran with it and said, okay, what if we took this concept and fed 10% of the entire internet at it? And that's how we got GPT-3. So the innovation of transformers is that when it takes in inputs, it has a better job of contextualizing individual inputs in the context of the broader input. So if you feed it like a larger sentence, like multiple paragraphs, it can recognize the patterns of the words inside of that paragraph. Also, the other big innovation, I think, was diffusion, which allowed us to do a lot of things with image AI, but those are two big innovations that pushed AI most recently, diffusion and transformers. But fundamentally, the AI is a neural net modeled off the human brain, and it transforms inputs into outputs. The way that ChatGPT's inputs work is it reads the inputs of everything that has been said before. So you can do a little test with this. You can do a multi-shot prompt and say, 2 plus 2 equals 4, 3 plus 3 equals 6, and you can change, add an equal sign, or do with words plus equals, etc., and then you can give it the next problem, and it will follow the same syntax, if that makes sense. So if you were using equal sign, it uses equal sign. If you were using the words equals, it will use the word equals. And it does that because it's taking in the context of what's said before, and then it's just guessing the next word in the sequence. So that is how AI works at its overly summarized version.
Well, you just gave a way better explanation than I could. This is why you're the expert on the subject. I think that, I don't think Google could give a better explanation on what AI is, unless maybe you ask ChatGPT. But yeah, I think for maybe the people that don't use AI every day, or maybe they just want to start learning how to use AI that are listening today, I think that's a great breakdown of how it came into being and how it's currently being used, and how so many of these brands are really tapping into this piece of technology. And Garik, I'm sure you have many, but if you had to choose one hot take in the AI industry, what would that be?
The hot take I would have is that there are more plateaus in AI than we think. That the fundamental innovation that we've really had has been the transformer architecture, at least between 2017 and 2023. And we're now milking that for all it's got. And we're finding ways to combine that innovation also with some other innovations. Like one thing that, for me, I find extremely exciting is that if you ask AI, I think the thing is how many R's are in the word referrer, like a referral. It will often get the answer wrong, but then if you ask it to write a script to count the number of R's in that word, it will then get it right. So what you're having it do is you're having it use its like programming system. You're basically having the AI write a hard logic solution to a soft logic problem, and I call it a soft logic problem because you're using language to describe it to the machine rather than math. So it's using hard logic to solve soft logic. So I think there's a few major innovations still to be had of how we combine the transformer architecture with these other tools, and hopefully start making it model reality a little bit better rather than just purely relying on language. But I think that there are plateaus. Importantly, a lot of those plateaus are how we as humans use AI. Let me rephrase that. We as business owners are using AI, because we're not using AI, if you're a business owner, for simulating experiments. AI can be used for that incredibly usefully, but the way we use it is primarily for marketing purposes, for summarizing, for research, for those kinds of things. And there I think the AI has plateaued for a while and will continue to plateau. So that the main innovation then is on us to do better prompt engineering and also creating automations to maximize the AI. And so my hot take is on the plateau, and we have to change kind of our mindset of how to get the most out of it by using tools.
I think plateau is a great word because it's still a fairly new piece of technology that has a lot to be discovered. I love that you picked that example too with the R's, because I just saw a tweet of that this week of AI counting lowercase r's differently than if there was an uppercase R, because it was always different for every case. So yeah, clearly there's still a lot of plateaus to discover and plateaus to really overcome. So I think that's a fantastic hot take. And to wrap up, what is one takeaway you want listeners to leave with today?
I think if I had one takeaway, it would be to start learning more automation tools. I think that in 2023, everyone was just scrambling to understand the technology. What is it good for? What can it be used for? Yeah. And so the first thing was just like, let me start playing around with this, asking some questions. I remember some of the first things I said were like, write me a newspaper put in the Roman times in the time of Nero, but make it sound like William Shakespeare. And it was just blasting away with it and seeing its limits. It was a lot of fun. But now we're in a position where I think people know its power pretty effectively, and instead what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out how we can add it directly into our businesses. And so the way that you would do that is, I would not recommend Zapier. I would recommend Make.com, formerly Integromat. It's just a better tool for a couple of reasons, by my opinion, for most people's use cases, especially when things get complex. And it's more cost effective for most use cases. So I would highly recommend that people play around with these tools. You don't need to be a developer to start using it, and start seeing the areas like, if you upload this podcast file into your, let's pretend you use a Google Drive, you can have a Make.com take that and then transcribe it automatically and then email you the script. So there's no extra steps, and you start getting compounding free time. That might only take you 5 minutes to do manually, but that's 5 minutes that, if you're focusing on automating, those 5 minutes free to then start freeing yourself up on the next task, the next task, the next task. And it compounds very, very fast. And so that would be a major takeaway. Just Make.com, the Google, the ChatGPT API, and see what you can do.
I do use Google Drive, so Make.com may beat out Descript, which is what I currently use. So I'll definitely have to give that a go. I mean, there's so many AI tools out there, right? There's AI for content generation, image generation, data generation, data pulling, so many automation tools out there. So I think, like you mentioned, just start learning as much as you can, because there is this whole environment and landscape of AI tools out there to help you revolutionize your business. And before we end the show today, Garik, where can people find you online? Are you working on anything that you want to share?
Yeah, so one of the newest projects we're working on, and I've worked with AI for about 6 years. Originally, back when it was just neural nets, we built some tools that use neural nets. But now the best way to reach out to me is on LinkedIn, and if cold outreach using AI seems interesting, you can check out aicoldoutreach.com and then give us a call.
Awesome. That'll all be included in the show notes. So if you have a question about AI, reach out to Garik. He will school you in it.
Say Pat sent you, I'll accept the
Garik,
invite.
Yeah, say it's coming from Brands Over Brews. Yep, absolutely. Well, Garik, it was great having you on today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Brands Over Brews. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe and leave a review. Your feedback means the world to me and it helps others discover the show. If you're interested in joining the show as a guest or want to become one of our valued partners, visit brandsoverbrews.com/contact. If you have any thoughts, questions, or want to connect, you can reach out to me on X at Pat B. Cooper. See you next time.